Hey there, Abdel Misa here. First thing first, I'm doing a YouTube live on Friday, June 26th at noon Eastern Time. You can ask me anything about the topics that I have covered, including the stock market, housing and oil, or maybe even my favorite color. The link for the YouTube live is on my channel. It's called Ask Me Anything. So make sure you add it to your calendar. Again, June 26th at noon Eastern Time. So this is part 2 of the video series about housing. In the first video, which I highly encourage you to watch, we spoke about everything related to the low interest rate environment we are dealing with and why it's attractive to potentially buy a house in this environment. In this video, we are going to cover even more important things, such as when do you know that it's the right time to buy, where are we at right now, and then I'm also going to cover a very important topic, which is using housing to build wealth. So if you wanna be rich, you better know what I'm going to be talking about. So here is the challenge. Obviously, home prices over the long term keep going higher. Why is that? Because of inflation. The central bank, the US Federal Reserve, targets a 2% inflation rate per year. And that's why over the long term, housing prices, just like stocks, go up in general. So if in general, prices of houses go up over the long term, how do you know it's a great deal and a great time to buy a house? I have found during my career 2 very important metrics that I have used, whether it's to look at stocks or find more for my own personal real estate investments. So the first metric I use is called affordability. Think about it this way. You buy a house, so you pay a certain price, and then you finance the house using a certain interest rates. Then you get a mortgage payment. Compare that mortgage payment to your income. The higher the income versus the mortgage payment, the higher the affordability. Let's now look at the affordability metric through time. The easy way to think about it is when the number is high, when the affordability is high, what it means is housing is very affordable. And when it's low, it means that housing is less affordable. So check this out. In 2006, right before the housing bubble, the affordability metric was close to 100. It was really low. So housing was not affordable. Why? It's because prices were high and interest rates were high. Now, the opposite happened after the financial crisis. In 2012-2011 period, the metric went up all the way to 200. So housing was really affordable and it was a great time to buy a house. So where do we stand with the affordability metric right now? It's at 167. So of course, it's not as good as during the 2011-2012 period, but it's certainly not as bad as in 2006. So it's somewhere in the middle, but overall, it's still more affordable to buy a house right now. The other metric that I use that's really important is the price to rent. Think about it this way, in very simple terms. If a house is worth $250,000 and then the rent per year is $25,000, then you divide 250,000, the price, by the annual rent, and you get a ratio of 10 times, right? So it's almost like 10 years of rent pays you the house. So what you want is for this ratio to not be high. You want it as low as possible. The other thing is that this price to rent ratio depends on each geography. It really depends where you're at. So for example, in San Francisco, the price to rent is at 50 times. It's crazy. Well, like in Detroit, Michigan, the price to rent is only at 5 times. So think about it this way as well. If you were to buy a house and then finance it and get a mortgage and then rent the house, when the price to rent ratio is very low, okay, so you're gonna be making money, meaning you can buy the house, finance it, pay the mortgage, and the rent will pay for everything, the mortgage, and you're actually making extra cash flow, okay? And not only that, you have the option of the house price going up, meaning you can make money two ways. You're making money because you get the monthly cash flow, and you can make money if the price of the house, because you bought it cheap, can go up over time. However, when let's say you buy a house at a price to rent ratio at 50 times, such as in San Francisco, and trust me, I mean the rent in San Francisco is already high, so that doesn't mean that the ratio is at 50 because the rent is low. I used to live in Silicon Valley for a long period of time, and I know how expensive it can be there. So if you were to buy a house in San Francisco, finance it, and then rent it, guess what? The rent is not nearly gonna be enough to cover your mortgage. So your only hope to make money is for the price of the house to go up. So you're not cash flow positive, you're buying the house hoping that the prices of houses are just gonna continue to go up, versus if you're buying it cheap and then you're making positive cash flow. Let's now look at buying a house from an investment perspective. And the first thing I would like to cover is buying a house as a hedge against inflation. Think about inflation this way. When prices of products and services just go up, meaning imagine the price of milk, the price of buying computers, buying cars, everything doubles, okay? Then it's a problem, okay? And so the worst case scenario in that case is to be in cash, meaning you're just sitting in cash and then the cash loses half of its value. Things that you used to be able to buy and now you can buy only half of them. Now, here is the good news. What you want in an environment of inflation is you want to have real assets. And buying a house fits the bill in such a scenario. Another potential investment, another real asset that works in general when you get inflation is gold. And by the way, why are we so worried? And a lot of investors are worried right now about inflation. It's because like there's a lot of money printing from the central bank. And so make sure you check my video in the link below where I cover that topic in detail. And buying a house fits the bill. And by the way, why are so many people worried right now about inflation? Okay, there is the fact that the Fed has printed trillions of dollars. There's a lot of money printed, and so people are like, okay, maybe, just maybe, prices are gonna go through the roof, and we might even be dealing with hyperinflation. So make sure you check out my video on this topic where I go over all the details. And here is, by the way, why buying a house works out well. Because as prices, let's say, double, guess what happens to housing? Housing also will follow inflation and might even outperform, okay? So your purchasing power is probably the same or even better, versus if you just had cash, you're in serious trouble. There's another reason why buying a house works in inflationary environment. Think about it this way. If you were to get a 30-year fixed mortgage, okay, and then later on we deal with inflation, the good news is your monthly payment does not change, but your income changes because it follows inflation. And so on one hand, your liabilities are right here, they don't change, and then your income goes way higher, so that's a good news as well. Let's now switch gear and talk about buying a house to build wealth. Housing can be a great source to build wealth. So check this out, okay? So assume you buy a house for $300,000 and then you buy it in cash. You go and like, look, I have the cash, $300,000. Okay, you put it in cash, and then the house goes up 20%. For the sake of the example, let's just assume that the house goes up in price instantly. Okay, so you made 20%, that's $60,000. All right, now check this out. Instead of buying the house in cash, okay, we're gonna go to the bank and then borrow 80%. So we're gonna put 20% down. 20% of 300,000, that's $60,000. That's your equity in the house. This $60,000 right here, and then of course you borrow $240,000. Right? It's the same house. The house went up 20%. The house is now worth $360,000. So guess what happened? Okay, you still owe the bank $240,000. However, your equity in the house is now $120,000. So you didn't just make 20% on your money, you made 100%. You went from 60,000 to 100,000, to 120,000. So you doubled your money. So instead of making 20%, you're actually making 5 more. Okay, this 5 times, it's called leverage. Where does it come from? It's because you bought a house that's worth $300,000 and you only put 20%, so you bought something that's 5 times more than what you paid for. Obviously, with this leverage, it's great if house prices go up, so it's fantastic, but it can also hurt on the way down, because if the house is down 10%, if the price of the house is down 10%, your equity will be down 50%. Okay, so you get it both sides. You can't just, there's no free money. Okay, you take risk. Okay, if it works out, you make a lot of money, but if it doesn't work, you get hurt as well. So this concludes part 2 of the housing video series. In the next video, I will cover the supply and demand dynamics, as well as personal tips that I have found very useful when buying a house. With that, please make sure you share, like, and subscribe. Thank you, and I will see you next time.